From the high plains of the Midwest, I bid you good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever your time zone might be. My nod to the late and great Art Bell. I'm Keith Sharp.
And I'm G. Dressel.
And we welcome you to Life After Life, a paranormal webcast where we talk about the paranormal, UFOs, or the unexplained. And the biggest question of them all, what happens when we die? Stay tuned. Hey! Hello, everybody.
Dude, I love the upgrade to the studio.
I know.
You really put
Upgrade
some time and effort into
the new nice studio. So how is everybody doing today? Hope well. Garrett, you had the flu last week, man.
Been sick, man. Feeling better though.
Don't lean so close.
Hey, I feel better. It's going around.
I know, but the thing is, you still.
I got you.
Garrett comes in the studio today. He goes, "Man, I'm still feeling bad," and I'm like, "Great, now I can get sick."
You know, I don't like to cancel things, so.
Well, I know.
And this is huge, man.
This is big. You know, we got the affidavit released. Got Richard Allen in jail.
Fantastic guest.
And we got the best guest here tonight. You guys are going to be so excited.
Do you think everything's going to be over our head when they talk?
Probably, yeah. What I've learned to do is just like nod your head.
Yeah.
And say every once in a while when they say something.
But you know that we do so much true crime though. Like, although we're obviously a paranormal channel and unknown things, this is fascinating for us to have these guys on, right?
Yeah, you know, I kind of find it defensive that most of the people are going, "Hi, Garrett. Hi, Garrett. Hi, Garrett."
Oh, well, I'm saying hi to everybody.
Oh, okay, guys. Oh, my bad.
I was on the back end like, hey,
no
guys,
one likes me.
Everybody loves you, Keith.
No, that's not true. But yeah, we got a fantastic show for you guys. We got Bob Motto, we got Brett and Alice from the Prosecutors. We've had Bob on the show before. He kind of talked a little bit. We talked a little bit about the Delphi case with him, and
but we got some cooking.
But this is the whole thing. So also, guys, in the link you can click on the affidavit if you want to, and you kind of we don't know how we're gonna do the show. If we're gonna actually read through all this, or I mean, we can. I'll talk to our guests, or we can just actually talk about it. I'm sure most people have read this, but
I'm assuming
if we need to go through it, we can have Garrett to read it. But let's go ahead and bring the guest on. So first up is Mr. Bob Motto.
What's up, man?
What's up, fellas? It's Mata with an A.
Mata. Oh, I'm sorry.
Come on, man.
Sorry.
Old. I knew that.
Is that Italian?
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I'm Italian, Irish, Scottish. So
I knew it. I just knew it from first time I met you.
And we got Brett from the Prosecutors Podcast. Thank you, Brett.
Hey, what's up, Brett?
Hey guys, how's
Thank
it
you
going?
for being here. And
what's up, Brett?
We have Alice, the Prosecutor Podcast.
What's up,
hey,
Alice?
everyone.
Smartest one out of all of them.
Okay. So I guess let's get right to it. And like I said, I had no format really for the show other than
Hey, we were laughing because when the intro was going, I was like, "Oh, I wonder if they know." Keith was like, "I wonder if they know about Bigfoot that we do shows on Bigfoot." Yeah. So,
well, no, we do paranormal and true crime, and so far it's been pretty half and half. We covered like a ton of true crime, but
sounds like the perfect show to me. I love it.
All right, thanks, man.
You.
Thanks, Brett. So, Bob, first of all, we really haven't got to have you to introduce yourself and tell all the readers, tell everybody from the podcast. Yeah, you can tell. How did you become an attorney, and what got you interested in being an attorney?
So I went to law school. That's how I became an attorney.
Does it take that?
Smart guy.
Yeah, I think my father was an attorney, so I think that basically, kind of set my path. I fought it for quite a while. I actually was a social worker for 5 years coming out of college.
Wow. So you're forced into the attorney position?
No. I soon realized, because that's a woman dominated field, and how women get screwed and everything like that.
Easy.
They don't get paid.
Like how you turn that around real fast.
That's what I mean. It's a really important function in society, and it's grossly underpaid. So I did that for a few years, decided it was impossible to make a living doing that. So I finally acquiesced and took my LSAT, went to law school, and the rest, they say, is history. And I did that for 21 years until the pandemic hit and gave me a chance to take a breath and for the first time in a really long time. And I wanted to take a shot at doing a podcast because I had been tinkering with the concept and I like telling stories. So, you know, as terrible as the pandemic was, it was actually phenomenal for me.
Yeah.
From a completely personal perspective, it was,
Right.
you know, it was life-changing. So, yeah, so we just kind of dug in, and I had that source material with the first season with my dad representing
Jeez, dude.
Gacy, and so it was kind of a good way for me to get into it. But you know, yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And
Yeah, after you was on the show, I went. In fact, that night I started listening. I did a binge watch or listen to all the Gacy tapes. Man, that was interesting, dude. Great shows. And man, that guy thought he was the smartest dude in the room, didn't he?
always.
I mean,
Most
such an
narcissistic
attitude.
sociopaths do. Like, that's kind of their game, you know. And like the interesting thing from, you know, defending them is you kind of have to play the game with them, you know.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like I've defended some pretty awful people, and you know, you're trying to build a rapport in order to try to defend them effectively.
Mhm.
You know, not that I'm trying to make a you know, create a friendship, but I do want to try to do my job effectively, and a lot of times that requires some kind of trust between
Right.
attorney and client. So yeah, it's
Fascinating.
yeah, like Gacy was absolute evil incarnate.
Yeah.
That's the only way I
Yeah.
can describe it. Like the most chilling thing, you know, listening to him, which pretty much holds true with every serial killer that I've ever heard speak, is just the matter of factness that they you know, in which they describe their killings. It's like, you know, doing the dishes. It's just, it's so
Yeah. Like taking out the trash,
Chilling.
man.
It's chilling.
yeah, it is. Is I can't personally relate to it. It's like it doesn't like function in my mind. So it's
Right.
you know,
Have you found most of your, like, some of your most evil people that you've defended? Do they all have that narcissistic characteristic about them, or is
I
it
mean,
just vary?
it depends, man. Like, I mean, to me, and Brett and I kind of touched on this. We did a nice little collab a week ago, and you know, to me, right, like pedophiles and aggravated sex offenders with, you know, children victims, to me, are about as evil as you get.
Yeah.
And those guys aren't necessarily narcissistic, you know. So it's like a different mindset, but
Right.
you know, as far as you know, the killers that I've represented, or convicted killers, very similar personality
Wow.
to Gacy. You know, it was stunning. And my dad tried both cases, so you know, my dad had mentioned that to me. He's like, wow, you know, they were similar. But you know, that being said, I still sit here not knowing whether or not Anthony Garcia is guilty. So
Yeah.
go figure.
Yeah. All right, Alice, how'd you get in all this? How'd you become a attorney and all the? Go ahead.
Well, unlike Bob, I didn't know any attorneys, and I accidentally ended up in law school. My office was in
Accidentally?
a law. I mean, like, you know, I had to pay a tuition and whatnot, but my office.
Walked into the wrong classroom.
I
Hey.
walked into the wrong class. I thought it was physics, and instead it was law school. Close, but not quite. My first job was as an econometrician. I wanted to be an economist, and my office happened to be in a law library.
Wow.
And so I really did kind of accidentally
yeah.
end up in law school. Never thought I would practice because just didn't think it was my thing. Never thought I could, you know, stand up in front of a jury and argue. Ended up loving it and have been practicing ever since. So yeah, there are lots of paths that lead to the law, and I've practiced on the prosecution side, on the defense side, civil, criminal. You know, some of the guys that Bob's talked about, you know, prosecuting sex offenders, pedophiles, you know, child pornography, kind of the worst of the worst that we've seen. It really hardens you, but somehow, because I have a friend like Brett who I prosecute with and practice with, you can kind of, you know, make your way through it all and still see some light at the end of the tunnel.
Man, anything that dealt with children getting hurt, oh my God, I just couldn't. I mean, like, I'm in the medical field and I couldn't work in pediatrics at all. I'd be crying every day, be depressed. And yeah, children, because I got 5 grandkids. I've got 4 children. I love them all. I love kids. And man, it just breaks my heart. I can't even watch those St. Jude commercials without tearing up. You know, so Anyway, well, Brett, what about you, brother?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I kind of have a similar story to Alice to a certain extent.
You walked in the wrong classroom.
Yeah, basically. When you grow up in the, and I don't know if this is true everywhere, but in the South, if you grow up in sort of the poor areas, if you're good at school at all, everybody expects you to either be a lawyer or a doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was terrible at science. And then I went to college and I became a philosophy and a history major.
Cool.
So basically it was starve to death or go to grad school.
Absolutely.
And so I chose law school, and so the rest is history. I don't have any lawyers in my family either. I'm with Alice on that. And like Alice, kind of been all over the place, worked for the big firms, worked in government, been a prosecutor for the last few years. And Alice and I, we're fortunate enough to meet each other and both prosecuted together and now have a podcast together.
That's awesome.
Well, I was going to ask that just before we get into the Delphi stuff. Like for you guys, did you guys just like start nerding out on true crime or something like in the office?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So all credit goes to Brett because Brett loves this stuff, right? I have like absolutely no stomach for scary things.
Okay.
And Brett said, "You want to do a podcast?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. We do this every day. It's just terrifying. I don't want to go home and research more terrible murders."
Right.
Yeah.
But he prevailed on me because just like Bob, the pandemic hit and we had nothing else to do.
Yeah, what else are we going to do, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, the podcast business went through the freaking roof in 2020 and 2021. It's just everybody started a podcast.
Subproduct though, like we would never be sitting here talking to these people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you guys like so much. Seriously.
Okay, so how you guys want to do this? Do you want us to read through the affidavit and we kind of go through it that way, or do you just want to just kind of talk about? Do you guys got some key points you want to talk about, or how would you?
I know Bob does. I know he's just sitting on something about the affidavit.
Actually, I'd like to hear from Brett and Alice first on the thing. I think it's at first glance. And you guys, I listened to your most recent episode, which I loved. I thought it was great because I had listened to the Rabia's thing with Scott. I listened to your 6-parter, so I wanted to see how you guys were able to dilute it down into one episode. You did a great job because it's compelling, man. It's like because there's those, but whatever. I digress. So
you can praise us as long as you want, Bob.
By all means, Bob.
Yeah. So no, I'd kind of like. You guys can read it, and then we can either go in, or if Brett and Alice kind of want to sound off, I'm anxious to hear from them, kind of like what they think like strength and weaknesses are.
Do you guys got anything you want to say?
I don't actually think it's that well. I don't want to be too critical, but I don't think it's actually that well written. So I don't know that reading it is going to be the best thing because you don't want to bore everybody to death. But I'll just say this as a general matter. And Bob and I talked about this a little bit the last time we were together, that there was just so much speculation. Why is it sealed? Why is it sealed? Why is it so important that it be sealed? And then you read it and you're like, no idea, no clue. There's really, and I had said maybe there's something in it that if you were involved and you read it, it would trip you off, and that's why they wanted you read it, and there's just no indication whatsoever.
Nothing.
There's nothing gruesome in it. There's nothing about the girls really in it. I have no idea why they.
And even the prosecution made the statement, we want it sealed because there's other characters involved. It doesn't even mention any other characters in this, or that there's anybody else involved in the case.
Well, as to that point, they're not going to do that because it's not relevant to Richard Allen. You know what I mean? So like they were going in and try to get an arrest warrant on Richard Allen. They don't need to be throwing any other characters that they, don't necessarily have enough evidence on, who they may suspect. But
I found it surprising they even said that, though.
I think there was some smoke and mirrors. There was, like in kind of what I'll get into, because to me, the bigger story, and I think Brett and I touched on this, and I had mentioned it. I had caught this story about a week before the hearing took place on the 22nd down in Delphi, that this statement, which Allen gave on the 13th, right after the girls went missing, he found some conservation officer and went and basically said, hey, I was on the trail. I was on the bridge from 1 to 1, between 1:30 and 3. I saw 3 different girls, and I never saw Abby and Livy. That was it. And, I was looking at my phone. I was looking at a stock ticker, whatever. He changed that story at some point the next time they talked to him and said he was looking at fish.
Yeah.
So, but the fact that thing got buried, and it was the Indiana State Police who, like, right before this affidavit came out, they said, man, what's going on with this investigation? They sent a group over to go dig into the files of the sheriff's office, and they found this document. And like, to me, because nothing has changed. Like, there is no additional evidence that has come forward since they had that statement from that guy.
Right.
So it's like, it's hard to applaud law enforcement on this one, just because if he is the guy, that was some pretty bad police work. And we're talking about a community of 3,000 in Delphi. It's small. I'm assuming, and I am assuming, I don't know it to be a fact, that the conservation officers probably lives in that area. And we all know what happened when they released that portion of the video and the audio. Everyone knew about it. The whole world knew about it. I have to think that anybody living in and around that community, that if I was the cop that he had talked to, I'd be like, oh, well, I mean, I did talk to a guy who kind of like looked like that guy, at least, at first blush. And he admitted that he was on the, like, to me, it's like unfathomable. Like, so honestly. So
a question for all you guys, does this happen often? I mean, where you have such blatant, I mean, okay, we got witnesses that described him to a T, right? And the police just totally overlooked this and went down other avenues. Is this common, or is it just bad police work?
Alice is busting at the same.
Alice, what do you think? Go ahead.
There's a lot to unpack there. First of all, and everything Bob said is absolutely right. And we can talk about why we think it was actually sealed when nothing on its face kind of meets the standard of sealing. But first of all, with the affidavit, just a reminder for everyone, the affidavit is exactly what Bob said. It is just a probable cause affidavit to arrest him. So that's why they don't describe the manner of death, because actually kind of the thing that ties him in the affidavit to Richard Allen is the bullet. Likely the girls didn't die by a bullet. Otherwise, they probably would have described in some detail, like another bullet from his chamber was found in the victim.
Right, or spent
that would
around.
matter.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, or shell casings.
Exactly. But because nothing that ties Richard Allen is probably directly on the girls, that's just not relevant for the arrest warrant. So that's why that's not in there. And also, it's really important that people know it's probable cause and not reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is what the jury has to find. And so it's a much lower standard in the affidavit. And
they're just trying to get in the house or something, right? Or get the arrest, right?
Well, they're just trying to arrest him. What you're supposed to have, though, is beyond a reasonable doubt, even when you go arrest. That's like the prosecutor's code, even though the law doesn't require it. So with all that said, I don't disagree with anything Bob said, in that the police knew, except the police is a really broad term. Remember, they were interviewing thousands of people. They interviewed, I think, everyone in the town times maybe 5 or 6 times, and then the surrounding areas. There is such thing, we did like a quick little Zoom yesterday with some folks, and I said that there is such thing as casting a net too wide, and then you don't have enough stopgaps, and that is absolutely true in investigations. When you get these tip lines and these like $50,000 awards if you get a tip that arrests someone, that actually sometimes is counterintuitive to solving a case, because the lines are flooded and people just want to be helpful, and you end up getting tens of thousands of tips and no one human can actually go through all of them. And that's a tactic for some people trying to get away with it, is to kind of divert law enforcement to say, hey, you know what? Listen to what Bob explained Richard Allen's testimony to the conservation officer was. It wasn't, hey, let me explain to you why you may have seen me on the path. It was, hey, let me help you find other witnesses. Because at that time, that point in time, they were just trying to get everyone who knew anything to come in and talk. And so they were thinking of him as spreading their witness list, as opposed to further investigating him. Now that's whether it's a downfall of the law enforcement or not. I mean, I think it was. Unfortunately, because of the media attention on such a small jurisdiction, it was almost predictable. There was, national attention on this tiny little law enforcement agency, and the conservation officer, who knows who he reports to? He could have been like, I saw that guy, but he's one of like 5, 6, 7, 8 jurisdictions, including the feds who are coming in, who probably have kind of bigger egos, saying, listen to me, I'm the big dog, I'm the chief, talk to me. And this little like peon of a conservation officer is like, hey, by the way, one of the 500 people I talked to today might have something to do with this.
Right.
Just to give you guys a view of what
so it kind of,
happened.
okay, I'm glad you said that, because when I read it, I thought this is the most bumbling case I've ever seen. But I can see, so basically this stuff could get buried when they're going over clues. They're not necessarily looking at what the whatever that guy was, looking at his statement, perhaps. I mean, is that all in there? I mean, when detectives do their research and they say, okay, we're starting over, do they keep going over that, or did that get misplaced somewhere?
I think that's exactly what happened. Is at some point the cold case people, I mean, one of the things they do is every now and then they start over. They reread every report. They talk to witnesses again.
Right.
And, we don't know exactly how this went down, but something Bob said or somebody said that, this conservation officer may have known him. Right. And in his mind, once again, you don't think the guy, who works down at the CVS is a double murderer who just killed 2 kids.
For sure.
So when you talk to him, all you hear is, oh, he saw 3 girls. If we can find those 3 girls, it's like Alice said. And then maybe, that report goes in a file and the next person who looks at it is a sheriff's deputy. And maybe he knows him too. And he's like, oh, that's interesting.
For sure.
And then finally, some, state police officer or FBI agent or whoever was going through the cold case and was reading all the files and was like, oh my goodness, did anybody talk to this guy?
Right. Yeah.
And that's sort of where it all started.
And with Alan as well, he had no background. He had no criminal background. He had traffic tickets. So he wouldn't have popped up on their radar necessarily. Because a lot of times, I mean, that's the first move. They're going to check everybody, sex offenders in the area, people that have violent crimes in their past. And, they'll start with them, after they get through the inner circle. They always start in concentric circles and move their way out. So in terms of their investigation, they're always going to start with the people closest to the victims. That's what victimology really kind of relies on, that. And then they work their way out. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, man, but 5 years is a long time. You know what I mean? It's like,
it really is.
Yeah. Cause I think the feds were out of it like after year 2, and at that point, it probably shifted hands back to, the sheriff's office. And then, I think the Indiana State Police were involved to some extent, but I mean, at the end of the day, I
often wondered though, too, I can't remember what the date was when they released the picture and then the video, and so Richard Allen at that point wouldn't think there was any film of him. Did he walk in interrogation with the blue jacket on? And, I mean,
no,
you got to wonder, because
the way I heard the story was not that he went, he sought them out, in the way that I picture, by us, we have Forest Preserve police, so they kind of, their job is to basically roam around in the Forest Preserve, make sure kids don't have kegs in there, make sure that, people aren't burying bodies, I suppose, whatever people do in Forest Preserves. So I have a feeling that this guy's, his beat was, the trail and the bridge. And that was kind of where, and I think that Alan approached him that day, after he found out that the girls were missing, and, he approached him. And to me, as a defense attorney, I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, either the guy's got massive balls, or, he's extremely clever, and was trying to play it up front and say, look, if I go talk to these guys right now, that takes me off their radar, because who would kill 2 girls and go talk to the police and admit that I was there? So Alan doesn't strike me as a criminal mastermind, but I'm basing that strictly on appearances. I've never spoken a word to the man.
Well, I mean, he obviously isn't. I mean, from what I understand, even in when they searched his house, that his jacket was still there. Apparently, he didn't get rid of his
jacket. Was there?
Okay, well, yeah, but there's pictures of him wearing that jacket even after the crimes. If you go to Kathy's his wife's Facebook.
Yeah, but those Carhartt jackets, all, you know what I'm saying? You could buy 10 of those. They
here's the problem. The problem, I get what you're saying, Bob, and I just want to give advice to everybody out there who's committed a crime. Do exactly what Alan did. Go talk to the police and tell them everything. Yeah. Because
wear your jacket.
Say, well, everybody has a jacket like that. But he said, basically he said, look, I'm a bridge guy, but I didn't kill anybody.
Right.
Like all the rumors you heard about people the girl who saw the creepy guy. He's like, oh, that was me. I was a creepy guy.
Yeah,
I saw her.
yeah.
She said hello. I didn't say anything. Yeah, I was wearing the jacket. Yeah, I had my face covered. Yeah, I probably was wearing a hat too. I was there at exactly the right time. I walked to the bridge, looked at the fish, and then went back.
Right.
I mean, it's just he may very well sink himself just because of everything he said. Oh, and the car at the CCP building or whatever it is, the Child Protective Services building that we all wondered that is in the affidavit. He's like, oh yeah, that was me. I was parked there. I mean, it's like, dude, you to the extent they get him, he gave them everything.
If you look at the timeline,
the Farm Bureau.
I mean, he handed it to him. The timeline was perfect from 1:30, I think, because he was seen leaving, I think, at 3:57 or something like that. He gave so many clues away that just even, I don't know, man. I just would think someone would have noticed that.
Here,
if I'm walking, if I'm saying, yes, I'm the guy on the bridge, well, they've been telling us forever. The voice we hear is that guy on the bridge who killed the girls. Okay. So how do we miss that?
So here's something that we've, that's kind of scary until you start prosecuting a lot of these cases. People like Richard Allen, because if this is the first time he's killed, this is not the first time he's dreamed of it. He's dreamed of this hunt.
Sure.
And that's what we call it, a hunt, because this is exactly what it was. He has dreamed of this for probably years. And if this is not his first murder, it's not going to be his last unless he's stopped because of the way he is. He is a serial killer in his behavior and his manner. These kinds of guys, these predators who hunt and get the thrill out of the hunt and the thrill out of the being chased, do these types of things. They insert themselves into the investigation, and we see this time and time again. We see people come into interviews with law enforcement all the time and give us exactly what you just said Richard Allen did. Every single detail except I didn't pull the trigger. I mean, literally down to a T. And it's mind-boggling as you're sitting across from them and you're thinking, I don't even have to trap you. You are giving me everything. But this is part of kind of the mental aspect of what they want. They're getting this. That's part of the thrill of the murder, is the thrill of kind of dangling all of these clues, like you said, next to them. And it's almost like they want to be caught. And I'm not exactly sure what the psychology is behind it, except when they are caught, we often have these people who say contemporaneous statements as they are being arrested with a smile on their face, like, took you long enough.
Yeah,
like, and it's like,
exactly.
My brain doesn't work that way.
Right.
Let me ask all three of you guys this. Do you think this is his first kill? I mean, you guys dealt with these kind of cases, I'm sure. Or was it so sloppy? Maybe it was his first. I mean, and I know that's a hard question to ask you guys, but what's your gut tell you? Do you think could be others?
I'll go last.
Okay, sure. Alice, what do you think?
My gut is this was his first kill, because even though it's messy in the sense that it's bloody, I don't think it was actually that messy in the way he carried it out. I think he planned it for a very, very long time. And so even though it's his first kill, I think this is something he's dreamed of for a decade, 5 years, maybe longer. And this was going to be the first. Sometimes serial killers don't strike for decades, right? Because this may have satiated that appetite for a time being. It did. He probably hasn't killed since Delphi. He was probably laying low. But kind of that thrill can stay with you. And then we see this with other serial killers. Before they're caught, their killing kind of intensifies, because just like drugs, they need that high sooner and sooner. And I don't think he has killed before, because it is a small town. You mentioned he doesn't have a criminal background. And I think there would have been more, at least his wife or his children or his community members, who would have noticed something off on other things that would have at least tipped him off as like a weird guy in town. And we don't have that yet. So I'll stand with, I think this is his first kills.
Brett, what do you think, buddy?
So I think, so a few things. Number one, I think it probably was his first murder. That doesn't necessarily mean it was his first crime, particularly crime against kids. I could totally imagine if they dig into him, they're going to find other things. The other thing is, I don't think it was the first time he went out on the trail with a gun and a knife. I think this was the first time that he went out there. I think he'd probably been out there a lot. Like Alice said, he's dreamed of this. He's planned of it. He'd gone out there before, but this was the time where everything came together. Assuming that this was a random encounter and not, there's that still looming. Was this a catfishing thing out there? Assuming that. this was not the first time he'd been out there, but this was the first time he could pull it off. Now, the one thing I'll say 2 things. The first thing is he got incredibly lucky. This was a really dangerous crime. Basically,
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's outside, but there's a lot of people on that trail. He's out in the middle of nowhere. He has to then walk back to his car. He's covered in blood and mud. Apparently somebody saw him.
Right,
You know,
right.
he got very lucky to have stayed
Right.
out for 5 years. And I know that is, like you were saying, the frustration of how is it possible they didn't find this guy for this long? That's the first thing. The second thing I'll say, and the only thing that makes me kind of doubt that this was the first time, other than going to the police and telling them what he told them, this guy must have been as cool as a cucumber. He didn't do any of the things that you typically see people do when they kill somebody. He didn't get rid of the jacket. He didn't get rid of the gun. You know, he didn't move. He just stayed there.
He didn't stop going to work.
He didn't
Well,
stop going to work.
Right.
There
Even
doesn't seem to be any change of behavior from him, even after the video comes out. And you got to think, he part of him had to think, man, somebody's going to recognize me. So that sort of coldness, that ability to just continue living your life and never give a sign, it seems like to anybody that it was you.
And most interrogators
know.
they read body language pretty well. I mean, have you guys ever watched the behavioral panel where they take like convicts and they sit there and they watch them? They go, okay, the lip drawn in, that means this. He looked down to the left, that means this. So it's going to be interesting when that interrogation video comes out and then those guys get a hold of that. I'm just kind of wondering if he gave himself away any, but I don't know how trained interrogators are. I mean, these guys that do this on this show, they specialize in it. But yeah, so I'm curious about that. All right, Bob, what do you think? First crime?
I look, you know, I'm a defense attorney. So I just have to tell you, you know, based on what evidence I've seen right now, there's not nearly enough to convince me that he did it. You know, I know that he was on the bridge. You know, there's just so many, like when we start kind of picking apart the facts in here, I'll get to it. But, you know, just the reality of, you know, I've handled cases where knives or sharp instruments were used to end people's lives, and they are extremely, extremely messy. They fight they're horrific. It's the most, to me, it's the most personal way you can kill somebody. It's much different than shooting someone. It's a very personal act, and and there is a massive amount of blood, and it's not just you know, on the victims, it's everywhere, which to me, you know, when you have the witness who sees the gentleman covered in mud and blood at 3:49, I think it was, in the afternoon, walking away from the bridge, that puts it past the time that Allen says that he was out there. He claims that he was out there between 1:30 and 3. And you know, kind of the bigger thing for me with respect to that witness, who was probably the best eyewitness in terms of, I think she saw the killer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, so whoever that person was, if it was Richard Allen, maybe not. The fact of the matter is, one thing that I know for certain is that when law enforcement went to each of these witnesses, when they were preparing this affidavit of probable cause, they brought a photo array, and that photo array most certainly included a picture of Richard Allen. And the thing that's like struck me immediately was that there was no positive identification by any of these witnesses that Richard Allen was the man that they saw. Now, I know one of the witnesses said that he had his head down, they couldn't see his face. That's not true of the other four. I got the impression that the person that saw him last got a pretty good look at him. You know, that's pretty damning. You know, I mean, in eyewitness testimony it's tough. Brett and Alice will tell you. I mean, it's at trial, it's tough to deal with, you know, because memories are short. You know, observations can be skewed by different factors, you know, and the fact of the matter is that the video had come out by the time most of these witnesses were spoken to. So, you know, the fact that video exists in terms of descriptions of clothing and things of that nature, because this guy was not wearing, the guy in the video was not wearing all black. He had blue jeans on.
Yeah, that was something I was wondering about too, that description.
Yeah, so I mean, like, we're not talking about like 4 descriptions of the same person that nailed it, every single one of them. It's not what we're dealing with here. So, like starting from that, like I need a lot more. I need a lot more
Yeah.
than what they're showing me before I'm calling Richard Allen a murderer. It's certainly he put himself in the vicinity. He certainly had the opportunity, which is one of the things that have to be looked at and proven at trial in terms of means, motive, and opportunity. He certainly had that. Whether or not he had the means, I don't. And we'll get to the unspent shell casing, and whatever they ran on that, but that's going to be a field day in court. I can tell you that right now. Whatever they think that they got from that, I called my ballistics expert immediately, like as soon as I read it, and I'm like, dude, what does this mean?
Yeah.
like tell me what tool markings can happen if it's ejected by the extractor, because the bullet did not go through a barrel.
Right.
It would have popped out. It would have been ejected by the extractor. It was either a misfire or something happened, or it came out of the magazine itself.
He could have been popping the clip out and then taking the live round out. That's what I'm thinking, because I've done that before with my handguns. It's like if you got one that's hot, you drop the clip and you do that and you try to catch the other one so your gun's not loaded.
Yeah, for sure. But like Brett was saying, I mean, this so happened to be President's Day. Okay, so all the kids were off school. If Brett and Alice are correct in terms of this guy has been just dreaming about this day, and he's been working his way towards this for years, probably walked that bridge hundreds of times and just finally got the ability and the courage to pull the trigger and, so to speak, but to take action and kind of fulfill what his fantasy has been in terms of doing this, to pick a day where that all the kids are out of school.
Yeah.
That bridge is going to be packed.
Oh man.
Which it was. There were just a lot of people out there that day. This was like, to assume, and is that why a knife was used? Probably, I mean, if gunshots are heard, that's going to alert attention.
Right.
The fact that we don't hear any of the witnesses that were around the area hear any screaming is stunning to me. That's one of the parts that just doesn't really add up to me. It's like one of those things when you just think about things logically,
right?
How you've got two victims at the same time, unless one was incapacitated while he was killing one of them. I can't, in the way that Libby strikes me, is she's not a passive kid. I mean, she had the wherewithal and the smarts and the courage to take that snap video. One of them says gun, which is unbelievable. I mean, these were two alert kids,
right?
These were, so obviously they're going to be overpowered by a grown man, but at the same time, the same token, they weren't complete does in the woods either. I mean, Libby, I think, was a tough kid, athletic kid, and I think that she would have put up a fight, so, and certainly somebody would have been screaming, so there's those factors of it, and because we haven't seen any of the real autopsies, I know the murder sheet leaks some kind of thing out there, but, in terms of actual time of death, I don't know that they've determined that. I think everybody's assuming. We didn't find the bodies until the 14th. So, a full night passed, so I think we're all assuming that they were killed at that time. And I don't know that we know that that's a fact at this point. So, and I'm basing that just kind of on common sense, that there's a lot of those things that we would expect when you have a large amount of people in one area that's outdoors in a relatively quiet area where you don't have a bunch of traffic that's dampening down noise, that if two girls are being brutally murdered in the woods by being stabbed to death, there's going to be some screaming involved.
That's something Garrett and I have talked about that for the last 3 years. Other with getting very graphic about possibilities of why that screaming didn't happen. But
I mean, if he is the guy, I think it's his first. But I'm not convinced he's the guy yet. I just need more evidence.
All the things you mentioned, as far as the time of day, the fact that there were a lot of kids, that nobody heard this, always for me pointed to that it was extremely premeditated. That there was a kill spot that maybe was away from people, and that he, had been out there quite a bit.
Well, something Brett brought up that to me it just blows my mind. How risky was this?
But
my God,
we talked about it early on. risk though, if you're prepared, you get more lucky. I think the word we used was, how lucky was it, right?
But how can you stifle sound? You know what I like?
Yeah.
Luck doesn't have anything to do with that. Like we're talking about the reality of a double homicide where
in the middle of the day,
kids were killed with a knife in the middle of the day,
right?
An area that there were many people. So what I'm saying is, like, at some point, we're going to find out whatever kind of timeline that the state is able to put together on Richard Allen as to what happens when he leaves. He's married. He gets home. What I'm suggesting is if the witness who sees the person at 3:49 p.m. covered in mud and blood, he's walking home. He's getting to his home in the same condition in terms of what he's wearing. He's getting into his car. It is very difficult to get rid of all remnants of blood in a vehicle. We know that they're processing his vehicle. I mean, even after 5 years, man, it's near impossible if he's covered in blood for him to get rid of everything. Did he go to AutoZone and buy new car mats? Like things like that they'll look for to try to say, okay, this is more circumstantial evidence because it's going to be a circumstantial case.
And does anybody know, was the wife at work? Possibly didn't have to, like, maybe she didn't get home till 6 and he's able to get home. And
I think it's likely,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what she did for a living, but it sounded to me like she had a 9-to-5er type deal. So, and adults don't get off President's Day. So typically we have to work. I mean, lawyers, we do, but
right. I'm sorry, Brett. I think I cut you off when you're getting ready to say something.
So I just think there's a few things that people need to remember. Number one, this is the very beginning of this. This is going to be a long process.
Yes.
And people, just need to be a little bit patient. We've talked about this before. You should look, I mean, unless the police just really overdo it to a point that I would recommend they not, you should look at a probable cause affidavit and be like, well, I don't know if there's enough here for beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right.
It's a probable cause affidavit. Right. And oftentimes, you're not going to put everything you have on the table. That's the first thing. Second thing, you wouldn't put anything you had after the arrest. For instance, in Indiana, my understanding is when you're charged with a felony, they take your DNA. They didn't have his DNA before. He'd never been convicted of anything. He wasn't in CODIS. We don't know if they have DNA in this case, but they've always acted like they do. So for all we know, they could be testing that. The other thing, forensics takes a long time. It takes a long time. So, there could be things from the car, from his clothes that have been sent off to labs that are being processed or that weren't processed by the time of the arrest warrant. And, there could be all sorts of other circumstantial evidence that will come in. For instance, people saying that he went down to there to Delphi all the time. He went down to the bridge all the time. I mean, just little things to sort of build the case of this is a guy who was continuously going here. And I do want to say this, because I think even if all they have is what's in the probable cause affidavit, I actually think they have enough, because he put himself there wearing exactly what Bridge Guy wore, parking where they said he parked at the time the murders happened on the bridge, and the girls say gun, they find a bullet, and it matches to his. Now, how good that science is going to be, I don't know. But the thing about forensics is it's most powerful when it's tied to other things, like the fact that you were there. So he's there, and there's a bullet that appears to have come out of his gun 2 feet away from the kids. When he's told the police he's never loaned that gun out, and there's no reason that bullet should be there. Right? I mean, that actually is pretty powerful. And I just don't. I mean, Bob's a defense attorney, so I get it. But I don't have. I don't have the doubt.
So your response, Bob?
So, and I was texting Brett the other night. Maybe it was yesterday. Whenever the affidavit came out, and we were kind of talking about a couple of things, and Brett and I had been discussing when I came on to their Legal Briefs pod, and we were talking about after the day of the hearing. And we were both just stunned at the length of time, that they set out the bond hearing. And what I had text Brett, which should kind of like run through my mind, is he's aptly saying, to run DNA profiles through a lab takes a long time, even if they have a rush on it, and I'm sure in this case they were able to, apply some pressure and say, look, we need this done, but it still can take months, a month at least, at the very least. that's why I think actually that thing was set out that far. I don't know. I'm certainly not going to say that there was any kind of ex parte communication between the prosecutor and the judge, because Fran Gull is not from that county. You know, she's a special judge that was assigned. So like, I don't think there's that kind of relationship, and she doesn't strike me, especially in light of the way that she ruled properly, I might add, on the unsealing of the documents, because constitutionally speaking, there was absolutely nothing in this document that required it to be sealed. So, you know,
that praise her for that a little bit more, because there's so many people who are conspiracy theorists about everything that happens in the judicial system, and we're just like, well, they'll just all work together to make sure this is in secret. And the judge unsealed it within a week. So props to her.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I was surprised. I thought we were gonna have to wait. I really did.
I did too. My guess, like I think when I was abroad, I was like, I think we were both kind of guessing like after the new year sometime, like probably before, just because like the interplay with the bond hearing, which I think is going to be pretty explosive. Actually, I don't think this is going to be your typical bond hearing. I think there's going to be a lot of action there, and you know, they've already filed their motion for a change of venue, which is interesting. You know, so I think that there's going to be a lot more witnesses than is typical in a bond hearing. Typically, there's no witnesses in a bond hearing, at least the ones that I handle. You know, so I think this is going to be a different beast altogether. You know, but I think that part and parcel with the thinking is let's get that date out there, because we really, you know, we sent this guy's buccal swabs, his samples to the lab, and we want to make a comparison, you know, and the judge isn't going to say, well, I'm going to give you that opportunity to do that, because like Alice said early on, typically, you know, you want to have beyond a reasonable doubt at the time that you're making arrest in a perfect world. You know what I mean? This case is obviously kind of taken on a you know, a life of its own, and it's not your typical case in terms of how it's proceeded. So I think it's one of those things where there was some external pressure. You know, you kept hearing rumors back in like June and July that an arrest was imminent, and then it kind of just faded away. And then some podcast is leaking things that weren't supposed to get leaked. And, you know, so it was like, there was a lot of stuff going on. And I think that there was some pressure that, and I think when they unearthed this statement by Allen, that they were like, well, that was enough, you know. And then, but kind of circling back to the bullet thing, like I really want to talk about that one, because like that's interesting to me. You know, I mean, the reality is that 40 caliber bullet is the most common caliber known to man. I mean, that is the most commonly purchased caliber of bullet. And so my buddy, my ballistics expert that I used at trial, he basically went and did the research, and he said in Indiana that 40 calibers are without question, in terms of trace searches by law enforcement, that the 1 and 2 guns are Smith & Wesson and a Glock. Okay. 40 calibers. Those are the 2 guns that they run the most traces on. The thing about a SIG bullet is that you can use a 40 caliber bullet, even if it's a SIG bullet, with any gun. Any 40 caliber will take any 40 caliber bullet. So just because the bullet they're claiming has the name SIG on it, and he had a SIG, you know, pistol, that, you know, that doesn't really mean much in terms of, you know, what it says about the gun and whether it was his gun or his bullet. So then you get to kind of the markings, which is really where the war is going to be, short of them having more evidence. And just like I've heard, and it's not substantiated, so you take whatever I'm about to say with a grain of salt, but it allegedly comes from a pretty strong source that they have nothing in terms of forensic evidence from the crime scene, which is stunning to me. Like nothing. Like that is what I'm hearing, that they have no forensic evidence. And I don't know if that's part and parcel that you're talking about a very small, you know, small county with a small sheriff's office. They don't deal with this type of thing.
Right.
Have the type of crime labs that bigger cities have, where they have experienced people that are going out that deal with violent crime scenes all the time. And, you know, I don't know what the case may be. Apparently what I heard is that there was what they're classifying as touch DNA that was on Abby's sweatshirt, which was actually it was Kelsey's. So it was
on the shoulder. Yeah,
it was on her shoulder, but that it's like they haven't been able to pull enough. Now, I don't know what the last time they ran that is. The way the DNA, in terms of the technology, that is changing day by day. I mean, we've gotten to the point where touch DNA is definitely usable.
Right.
Whereas 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it wasn't necessarily, in terms of what they were able to do with the technology. So, I mean, maybe that's something they're going to run through again. Maybe that's old information. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, we all want the right guy to get nailed.
Absolutely.
And if this is the right guy, then like, I just hope that they can get the evidence, because I don't want it to be, and Brett, this better than anybody, man, mere presence is not enough. Mere presence at the crime scene is not enough. We need way more than that. But like you said, this investigation, frankly, has just started. I mean, they are going to be doing a ton of digging in the next 2 years, because that's probably how long this is going to take to get to trial. And, they're going to be unearthing everything that they can in terms of building a timeline of where this guy was, what were his habits, because it's like Brett said, if they're like, well, this guy was out at the bridge 3 times a week, you're immediately thinking this guy's a creep,
right.
that's where kids hang out. You know what I mean? It's like a guy going to the park all the time, just lurking around. It's like it sets a very clear image in your mind of what he has going on in his head. So, it'll be interesting to see, but I echo what Brett's saying. Let's all just take a breath. There's going to be a lot more investigation. There's going to be a lot more facts that are going to come out. And then you can see like the import of why they didn't, like, they cut out the fact that the girl said gun. Okay. And you know why they did that? Because if they would have included that in there, and the killer, who would have obviously been in the area, heard that they had that, he's disposing of the gun.
Sure.
Whereas he didn't use the gun in the commission of the crime. He has no, and he's probably was not aware that he lost that particular shell casing. That probably happened in the midst, and he probably didn't realize it. I'm sure if he would have seen it, he would have picked it up. So I think there's a strong likelihood that the killer didn't see it. And they knew at that point, if we release the fact that we know that there was a gun at the scene, this guy's getting rid of it. We don't want that to get out. We're going to keep that on the DL, because when we get the guy, we want him to still have the gun in his possession, but then you've got like everybody thinking that this guy kept the same jacket. I don't think that he did. Like, to me, that's absurd. I don't think that there's any way. I mean,
I wouldn't think that, but that's just something
that I
heard.
Killing 2 girls in the middle of the day is absurd too. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, and
doing it in broad daylight.
Well,
we don't know that it was in broad daylight, is what I'm saying.
True.
We don't know the time of death.
Okay, the darkness from the trees. All right.
But I think, regardless of going back to like the very first of this conversation, you guys were all in agreement that people that commit these crimes don't think like us. So that would be the only reason, that somebody would actually keep a jacket. That would be insane.
Yeah, if he was absolutely
insane.
If he was one of those narcissistic people who had that kind of thought, like, they're not going to catch me. I've got.
Yeah.
And I could be wrong. Maybe he, the blue jacket we see him in after the murders on the website. I mean, maybe it's a different blue jacket. Maybe he liked blue. I don't know, but he's definitely wearing a jacket that's very similar to the one that whoever was on the bridge. Again, that I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not challenging you by any means, Bob.
No, I'm just
saying.
I'm just telling you what the defense is going to bring up, because it's all legitimate.
Sure.
I mean, like, Carhartt is a very, very popular brand in the Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a fact. Like, they're going to go, and they're going to go to whatever local stores that are there that people buy Carhartts, whether it's, out by me, it's Farm and Fleet, and they're going to show how many people own that jacket. And how many people, and everyone wears blue jeans. It's common garb. So the garb is not.
Well, the only reason why it would be important or specific is if, like you said earlier, blood is real. This is what we were talking about before the show. Like, if somebody saw this person with blood and mud all over them, like, that's really hard to get rid of. So, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't even know.
To wear I don't think.
And so, Bob, you're probably right. I mean, because I don't think you could actually, if you were totally blood stained in a jacket, I don't think you could wash it out.
There's no way he kept it, dude.
Yeah, Alice, I'm sorry, we interrupted you when you're getting ready to say something.
Oh, no. So it's possible that he got rid of it, but on the other hand, it's possible he kept it. First of all, blood visually is easy to get rid of, not forensically.
Right.
Yeah.
And just a reminder, Carhartt, like Bob said, is a type of jacket that is kind of a staple in especially this area.
Yeah.
And he's probably had it for decades. Honestly, it's a weathered jacket. You can wear it for a long time. It doesn't go out of
For
style.
sure.
And in fact, if he got rid of it, it may have been something that his wife would have been like, what the heck? You've had the jacket for 10 years. What happened?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
thank you.
and the other thing about at the very beginning when we were like, we had people say, this is Bridge Guy, or at least what he's wearing. How did they
Yes.
not know? Except, remember, what they're probably seeing in 500, 1,000 reports of interviews is that, I don't know, 2/3 of the guys who were described in this town wore what he wore that day.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
so not only is he feeling pretty high and mighty, that he's being described as just about every other white male in that town, which is probably honestly a huge demographic there.
Right. For sure.
He's also like, why would this is like a good coat, right? I mean, remember, there's not always rational thinking. Yes, I may have murdered someone in this coat, but this is also the coat I wear 300 days out of the 365 days of the year.
Right.
I wear it all the time. It's in the back of my closet.
And I've been
Hydrogen
fantasizing about this, and I
Yeah.
can still wear this around.
Sure,
Yeah.
hydrogen peroxide gets out the visual, blood. I do it all the time. My kids, bump their teeth and there's blood everywhere. If you pour some hydrogen peroxide, it comes right out visually, not
I'm so
forensically.
lazy. I just throw that stuff away.
Yeah,
good to
Richard
know.
Allen doesn't strike me as a laundry guy, though. You know what I'm saying? And,
Fair.
and we're gonna find out like what
Yeah.
his wife's schedule is, because I'm telling
Absolutely.
you, coming home and cleaning up from a murder like that is going to be
Right.
a massive undertaking. And you're talking about the wife saying, "Well, where's your jacket?" Well, when they're like, if he's bringing the clothes down to the washing machine, there's inevitably going to be blood droplets everywhere.
For sure. Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
the way it's going to be, So it's like there's a lot at play here, and I'm interested to see what the wife's position is going to be in terms of what she observed, what she didn't observe, immediately thereafter and the days thereafter. Like all those kind of things are going to tell us a lot. And because of privilege, because they're married, she doesn't have to say anything,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
so she may not. I'm sure that her husband's attorneys are telling her, be quiet. You're not talking to anyone,
Yeah.
For sure.
at this point. So like, I don't know how much we'll get, but and let's remember they effectuated the search warrant of the property on the 13th. So it was a full 13 days before they arrested him. They took the jacket out of the house. They took the boots, the knife, gun, so they took a bunch of stuff, and that was done quite a bit earlier than the time that they arrested him. So, there wasn't much in terms of specifics. Obviously they're trying to run, forensic testing on all that stuff. Additionally, I'm absolutely certain they took every electronic out of that house.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, they're scouring that to see what's what on there. And I have a feeling if this case is going to get solved and he's going to get convicted, it's not going to be on DNA. It's going to be on digital forensic data. That's what I think will nail him, honestly, if he's the guy.
And just one thing on what Bob just brought up, because I think it's an interesting point that a lot of people haven't been discussing. There is a second affidavit out there because there was a search warrant. So there would have been a probable cause affidavit for the search warrant. And what's interesting about that is they did not have the bullet at that time, right? Or they didn't have the gun because they got the gun from the search.
Right.
So that would mean either there's stuff in that affidavit that wasn't in the arrest affidavit, or they were able to get a search warrant, which still requires probable cause that you're going to find evidence of crime based on the probable cause affidavit you've read minus the gun, which is, I think, pretty interesting. It makes me wonder if maybe the two affidavits are actually a little different, and there might have been some stuff in the search warrant
I
affidavit
bet they are.
that didn't make it into the arrest warrant affidavit.
Well, you figure, and just for you guys out there that aren't lawyers, in terms of warrants, there's got to be specificity in terms of what they're looking for. So if in fact they had that shell casing and they saw, a brand on it, I think that more likely than not, they would have listed the weapon, assuming maybe because they knew it was a 40 caliber, bullet.
Right.
So, I mean, they knew that going in. So I'm assuming, because it's not a free for all in a search warrant. It's like, you're not going in and just searching everywhere for everything. It's like, you have to have specificity for what you're looking for, indicia of a crime, and the crimes that they're talking about are, abduction and murder. Those are the two things that, that they're looking for: ropes, guns, knives. Obviously clothing that the killer would have been wearing.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so in a search warrant, like you said, so if let's say they saw something incriminating, yet it's not listed on the warrant, they cannot touch that. Is that correct?
Well, not necessarily. If it's in plain view.
Well,
okay.
There's doctrines that get you around it, but you can go get a subsequent warrant to.
What about if it's
that's
iffy?
the smart thing?
Like they go, well,
that's the prudent move. Sure.
You know what? That's a really, really great point that both Bob and Brett have brought up. And I want to circle back really quick to that bond hearing that we all talked about. Oh, it's kind of strange. Why is it set so far out? Remember, and I don't know exactly how this judge runs her courtroom, but scheduling is an administrative matter. But I've never had a bond hearing where the defense was asking for it to be sooner, especially when it's so many months out, and there wasn't some movement or some filing by the defense to lodge an objection or even maybe try an interlocutory appeal, which is to ask a higher court to evaluate what's going on because constitutional rights are violated. And that's interesting because even though we don't have access to the search warrant affidavit, the defense should have it in discovery. So whether they've read it or not is another question, but they have more information than what we do as the public. And they may not be fighting how far out the bond hearing is because they may have leads that they want to develop themselves, or we've seen this before from defense counsel. They know there's really no actual harm because they think they're unlikely to get out on a bond hearing. So they would rather not have that explosive hearing early on and kind of taint what the public knows about the case. So there's lots of strategies at play here. But all I want to say is if the defense had wanted this hearing sooner, it is unlikely we wouldn't have at least heard in a press conference, because they've been pretty vocal about how innocent their guy is, or in a filing or some sort of outcry that his bond hearing was requested to be sooner and this judge is corrupt somehow. We need to recuse her because she has set this bond hearing so far out and violated his constitutional rights. So these are just things to think about as we're preparing for what Bob is right. This is going to be essentially a mini trial at this bond hearing, and it may behoove Richard Allen actually not to have it sooner rather than later so they can develop their own witnesses.
And Alice, one of the things that Brett and I were talking about on your guys' episode was the fact that, we don't know how they're going to get them indicted. We don't know if they're doing a grand jury. We don't know if they're doing a preliminary hearing. We don't know if it's going to be by information or indictment. So, and that's got to take place at some point, like soon, and that's and prosecutors, and I think you guys will agree, the preference is grand jury because you're going in, you don't have the defense there, you don't have the defendant there, you're basically putting your officer up, and you're getting the facts out there. So yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of interesting things coming down the pipe, and I wanted to ask you guys, what do you guys think about the motion for change of venue?
Are you talking to me or them?
I'm definitely not talking to Garrett and Keith.
What's your thoughts, Garrett?
I'm like, he's definitely talking to them, Keith. What are you talking about?
That was my feeble attempt at humor. I'm sorry.
It was hilarious, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Great.
I think it should be granted. I think it will be granted.
Yeah.
I think it will be
That's my thought on it.
What do you think, Alice? Yeah.
I think, especially if it's raised by the defense, why leave any open appeal issues? Grant it, just get that issue off the table for appeal purposes.
Exactly. And I think that the way that they can kind of if it's because of that financial aspect always comes into play when you're talking about the county, but I think the easiest thing that they can do is probably import a jury, it's very easy to do. It's basically the cost of putting them up, sequestering them in a hotel.
It's going to be so hard though, isn't it, guys? I mean, this case is
going to be as hard as you think, man. If you go into kind of the Midwest and you talk to old folks, they have no idea about this case. When you're out of Delphi, man, it's in that town and that surrounding area. And, for all of us true crime nerds, obviously in our minds, it's impossible to ever be able to impanel. But when you get into, into those counties in rural Indiana, man, they're not going to be hip to that type of information. And frankly, they were talking about Fort Wayne, Indiana, in their motion for change of venue. They had done some research, and they were using Google Analytics to kind of break down, within, 24 hours of Richard Allen being arrested, within Delphi, like 70% of the people in that town had Googled his name.
Right.
You know
Yeah,
what I'm
right,
saying?
sure.
So it's like, whereas, and then the further you move out, like Fort Wayne was like half that, you know, and then when you get even to a more rural area, it's going to be less than that because people, you know, if it's not in your own backyard, you're not necessarily as hip to what's going on. And it's definitely not in the daily news every day. You know, if you're in another small town, and Indiana's filled with just lots of small little towns, you know, and farming communities. So I don't think it'll be as tough as you think to get a jury impaneled. That's going to be, because both sides want a fair and impartial jury. Both do. Like there's this misnomer that, you know, that the prosecutors want to have a bias. They don't. Prosecutors don't want anything on the table that's going to have an appellate issue arise that's potentially going to send that case back
for sure,
because it's a nightmare. You know what I mean? So like everybody wants to get it right the first time. And Brett and I went into this kind of discussion at length the other night, but you know, that's the truth. I mean, everyone wants to do it and get it done properly the first time. So I think it'll be granted. And I think that the easiest way to do it is they just import a jury instead of like drag, because like moving all the staff, you know, because it's like, you have to understand, you're not getting the judge from the county that you move to. Your judge is the judge. The prosecutors from our county are moving. Like, you know, the defense, everybody stays the same. They're just moving buildings and they're pulling a pool from, you know, that community. Everything else has to move from, you know, the county that they're in. Carroll County is going to basically pick up and move. It's a lot. It's a lot, you know, it's like, I think.
A famous example of that's the Casey Anthony case. They imported a jury from, I think, like Clearwater, Florida, into Orlando. Yeah, so it'd be it's the same thing. You just find some people. Yeah.
Funny story. The first case that they ever did that was the Gacy case. They imported the jury from Rockford, which is probably about 60 miles out of the city, you know. So, and that's what they did. They brought them in, sequestered them, because like moving that particular trial, like the thought of it was like a nightmare, you know. I mean, they had so much evidence, you know, because you have to bring it all. You got to bring it all with you, and it's a massive undertaking. Plus, you know, you have to house everybody, you know, for potentially a 6-8 week trial, whatever this thing's going to go. So, you know, but I agree, it's got to be done, you know, just so they can get it right the first time.
Right. So a question for all three of you guys on the, because I still have a lot of viewers asking me this. The Kleins, we gotta address the Kleins. Were they involved? You know, I've got so many viewers that they believe, you know, that Kagan was involved in this. His dad, this was all catfishing. Do we think this is catfishing, or what do you guys think?
Here, stand up.
Oh, good night.
Good night.
All right,
that's sweet.
Sorry, guys. You guys go. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Oh.
Look, coincidences happen in true crime. Like, people like to say there are no coincidences. There are definitely coincidences. My understanding is the police say that they know that this Anthony Shots account was communicating with girls and that there was some plan for them to meet somebody that day.
Right.
That is quite a coincidence. If on the day that they were supposed to meet with one predator, another predator independently just happened to stumble upon them and murder them before the other predator could get there in Delphi.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of predators out there. Bob and I talked about this last time as well. So scarily, that coincidence might not be as big a one as you think. But to me, I just feel like there has to be some connection. And I'm not sure what it is. Alice has a really great take on this, and I'm not going to steal it from her. But I just feel like there has to be a connection.
I just want to add this for you guys saying anything, because I'm not. You're probably aware of this, but I don't know if you are or not. Kagan Klein's phone searched for the mobile gas station in Delphi the day of the murder. That's less than a mile from Richard Allen's house. That's a fact. So I mean, to me, it's like, man, that kind of is pretty incriminating. I mean, why would you be looking up directions to that gas station? It's so close. And it's in Delphi, and they lived in Peru at the time. So why would you need to, you know, that day of the murder?
And that would answer the 5-year question, right? Like the why did it take so long for them to find this?
Sure.
Because maybe he said, this is your guy. And they look back through their files, and sure enough, there was a time where he had shown up and talked to, that's possible. And maybe that was just something they didn't want to put in the arrest warrant.
Yeah.
I want to hear Alice's take. I want to hear it.
Yeah, I think the fact that they are both in the Delphi area, and it seems like once Klein spoke to investigators, things started moving for Richard Allen. I think there's probably something we just don't know. But what we at least see in our line of work is that the pedophilia community, the kind of this community, they talk to each other on the dark web, on websites. They know who each other are. What we know about these two guys is they are grown men who have an affinity for young girls, whether it's just talking to them in a sexual way or wanting to kill them. We know that clothes were taken off of these girls, right? So whoever killed them, it wasn't just for violence purposes. There was probably some sexual element. We don't know about that for sure, but clothes were taken off. And so with that in mind, these guys, even though he lived in Peru, this whole area is pretty small. It's likely that they knew of each other, even if by screen name. And in this community, we see a lot of bragging because it's not often that you are able to put hands on assaults. There's a lot more bluffing and a lot more, this is what I've done, this is how I've catfished, this is what I plan to do, or even just lying. I've met up with these girls. I meet up with them all the time. This is what we do. Their parents don't even know it. And you kind of share your bluffs with each other and you share your victories in a way that belies who the characters are behind the screens. Because usually these people come in and they are like meek and not alpha men. But what they portray, at least to their community of men who like young girls, is that they are these huge alpha dogs who can direct girls to do whatever is in their sexual fantasies. So I don't think it's impossible that they knew each other, even if not personally, in this kind of cyber world, and that it's possible that Klein bragged about this either directly to Allen or to a group they're a part of. And Allen knew what was about to happen, or he knew about this conversation. And it may be that Klein didn't even try to set up the girls to be, targeted by Allen or anyone, whoever killed them. In fact, he was bragging, which is what they often do. And that's how Allen, or whoever the killer is, got a whiff of what was going to happen. And it wasn't a coincidence after all, but he had a tip off and he knew, or Klein never meant to go after the girls. He was just going to ghost them because he wasn't brave enough to actually carry out meeting them. So that's not impossible. We just don't know. That's complete speculation. But in this world of, we see a lot of child pornographers, we see a lot of this type of bragging and a lot of people actually picking up on tips of other people and, furthering crimes using information they find out on social media.
For sure.
And that's why, I strongly believe that what will convict him is going to be digital. Like I just think that ultimately at the end of the day, when they start, because law enforcement's got the ability, there's this misnomer that you can delete everything off your phone. You can't delete anything off your phone. They're able to hook it up to, like, there's Cellubrate is one thing that they use, and they could take a dummy phone. They could pull all the data off there, including everything that you've ever thought that you deleted. Once it's on that hard drive, it's buried in there. Like I've had clients where, they had texts that were deleted 4 years ago, and I'm talking like 97% accuracy, that they're able to pull all that data off. And it's the same with computers. So, if that smoke is there in Richard Allen's house, they're going to find it, digitally speaking. So, and that's going to be the kind of stuff that will really, kind of seal the deal. Cause I agree, like with Alice, it certainly is a possibility, cause they do creep around, kind of in that circle, like under the cover of darkness and, creeping in corners. It's how that community is. And, a lot of them, exactly like Alice says, a lot of them, to take that step to where they're actually doing what they fantasize about is a lot for a lot of them. They work their way towards it very slowly. They don't go out immediately. And, but the thing about, like, I keep bringing up the fact that it was President's Day and all the kids had off school. And this is an area that Richard Allen knew that was frequented by kids. Like, I mean, he didn't need to have it set up. Like, he knew there would be kids out there. You know what I'm saying? It's like, so I don't know. Like, I don't know if it was a crime of opportunity or if it was, the girls were targeted. I mean, it's hard to know. And, we probably won't know until trial, to be honest.
You know what's interesting? So he told the police he was looking at a stock ticker, and you keep mentioning President's Day, and I just remembered the stock market is closed on President's Day.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
So,
that's
and that's another thing. Like,
I thought that was really random too, that he's looking at the stock ticker. No offense,
totally random. It would also mean he had his phone there.
Is that true? Is the market closed?
I just looked it up. President's Day is a U.S. stock market holiday.
Brett, look at you.
Oh, Brett.
Brett can crack the case,
bro.
One for the prosecution.
Crack the case.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
Hopefully somebody in Indiana is watching this right now.
Hey,
yeah, Brett, you need to call that in.
Anonymous phone call tip to the prosecutor's
Absolutely.
office. Hey, you might want to look and see whether or not the stock market was open on President's Day. Just saying.
Yeah.
That's a good witness right there. Judicial notice.
Well done, Brett. Well done.
Well, hey, I was going to ask, like, in regards to prosecuting, we talk a lot about like the uniqueness of this case, and I said earlier, we're not necessarily like a true crime channel per se, but we followed this case for a long time. And we call it like the Delphi situation, just because of the timing of it, the compounding of like the social media presence and the YouTube channels. Do you think that because of this situation that's evolved over the last 5 years, that to get to this point with Richard Allen, the prosecution must have something? Because although there's like this internal pressure to solve the case, there must be so much more pressure to get the case right, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right. Do you feel like that, at least from your standpoint, that would be the case? That they would have to have something more?
There's enough to prosecute, I guess, is what they were saying with the affidavit. But you would need, I would think there'd be more.
There's been so much pressure on law enforcement because of how it's been handled in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So
one thing Bob brought up that was also, I mean, about the DNA takes a long time. There had been speculation about they were digging up the dead cat to pull a hair from the cat because they found a hair at the crime scene. And if you remember, Tobes said, well, it's an unusual DNA that we have. It's what as he described it, unusual. And so there's been, I don't know if it leaked but they were saying that
Murder Sheet got a hold of it.
That possibly there was a cat hair, and what they were digging back there in that pit is they were digging up this dead cat, and they were just taking a hair sample from the cat to have it tested for DNA. Again, it's all speculation. That's just something that I've heard. So,
Brett, you leaned back in your chair when I said that earlier.
Wait,
well,
I'm not reading body language or anything, but
somebody in the chat said that President's Day was the 20th. Maybe it was just Lincoln's birthday on the 13th.
Well, they were out for school because of snow day. They had extra snow day. And that's
is that what it was?
Yeah, it was a snow day.
Snow day?
Yeah, I don't know if they take
I didn't say anything because I thought maybe it was President's Day.
Brett had just cracked the case right there. That's not nearly
well. Let's to keep it alive though. If he said he was watching a stock ticker, that means he would have his phone. Right. If imagine a scenario in which they did a geofence warrant, which I would think they would have done, and they had every cell phone that was pinging, and his cell phone wasn't pinging, that would mean he didn't bring it with him because he was smart enough not to bring his phone, because that would link him to the place of the crime. But then he lied about having his phone, which would still be useful. I mean, either he had his phone there, in which case they'll be able to track him, like Bob's saying, or he lied about the fact that he was looking at the stock ticker. Either way,
just compounds
that
everything.
Should be something they win. Look, you're supposed to believe as the prosecution that you have proof beyond a reasonable doubt before you arrest somebody. Alice said that.
For sure.
There is pressure to get this right, so you would think they wouldn't make an arrest until they knew they had it. However, there's also pressure to make an arrest, right? So it's a double-edged sword.
Yes.
I mean, you can imagine a situation in which they get that forensics report back on the bullet, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is him! Let's go arrest him right now!" Right?
Right.
And now, I agree that it's been 5 years. It would surprise me if they don't have more. I will be surprised.
I guess that's a great idea. Would you be surprised?
Me too.
For
them going in on the arrest warrant, it's a much lower burden, than beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, it's still a substantial burden, but it's much less than beyond a reasonable doubt. And if they've got a smoking gun that they felt, because collectively they'll sit there and say, okay, do you think we have enough without putting this in there? And ultimately, I mean, the effect that it has on the defense is not that great, because they're going to get whatever they have in reciprocal discovery anyway. But in terms of kind of like what we're doing out here, I mean, it kind of has a big effect. And if they really are looking at another suspect, like I have a sneaking suspicion that it's got something to do with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Exactly what Alice was saying. That's likely a scenario. I mean, there's been too much talk about it. That Anthony Shots account just coming out of nowhere on this thing is way too coincidental, like in him being in the area. That it's like you said, like Brett said, coincidences do happen, but you know what? Sometimes they're not coincidences.
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
So do you think they're scrambling? I mean, they got to be scrambling, trying to make another arrest if they have, you know what I'm saying?
I don't think they're scrambling. I think they've got 2 years. I mean, like when I tried the Garcia case in Omaha, Nebraska, believe me, they investigated that thing up until the day of trial. I mean, they were finding witnesses a year and a half in. They found their strongest witness in terms of who I felt was their star witness a year and a half after the arrest. So they're going to keep looking, man. They're out there, they feel better because they have them in custody now, and I think it's going to open a lot of avenues of investigation for them. So, we'll see where it goes. But just based on it'll be a tough trial. It'll be a very hard fought trial if this is what they have. I mean, obviously you've heard us kind of go back and forth. There's going to be strong arguments from both sides. At the end of the day, does it reach the level of beyond a reasonable doubt for a jury? I don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like Brett and Alice are going to make like competent arguments that are compelling, and I'll do the same from my end. You know what I mean? So it's like you want that direct evidence if you can get it. If not, you want, because the circumstantial case can be as strong as a direct evidence case without question. In most cases, frankly, are circumstantial, I mean, that's the reality of it. So,
do you think this, I mean, we kind of touched on a little bit, do you think this case could be possibly tried in 2024? I mean, that long, or do you think it's going to?
Oh yeah, for sure. They're like, I told my listeners, I'm like, if you're under the delusion that this thing's going on that March trial date, there's not a snowball's chance in hell that it's going on that date.
Right.
No way. This thing it's just the nature of the beast, and it's not just the state, it's both sides have to do their remember, the defense can be getting all of the discovery, and they're going to conduct their own investigation. They're going to go out and they're going to try to talk to the witnesses, whether or not they're successful is another thing. But, if they can find alternative suspects, they're certainly going to try to do that, and they'll be getting like a huge influx. Like you can only imagine after 5 years, the size of the discovery package that are going to get. It's going to be like what I got in Garcia was 17 binders, because the first 5 years went by and the case went cold, and Omaha PD left no stone unturned, so we got a massive amount. And it's exactly what Alice had said early with like they had a tip line, and you get thousands of calls that are related to nothing, where everyone thinks they're being helpful, oh, well, I think this might be the guy, but and the cops are doing their best to try to vet all of them, because you never know, one might be legit. So you're not picking and choosing, well, this guy, so they're calling everybody. So when we got it as the defense, I'm having to listen to every interview with every single tip line person that they talk to. And, and there's all sorts out there, you know what I mean? There are, and especially in cases like this where they're high profile, everyone wants to kind of be involved if they can be, and whether it's trying to be helpful or just because they want to somehow inject themselves into the case somehow. Sure. So yeah, there's just going to be a lot. It's going to take a really long time to get it to the point where both sides are ready for trial, plus all the motion work that's going to take place. So,
well, I mean, to put it in perspective though, sitting here this time last year thinking that it might never get solved.
Right. At least we're at the beginning, and even if we gotta wait, we gotta wait. And of course,
it's like that the Moscow killings, man. I'm like,
Yeah,
seems
God,
like-
that's a crazy case, man.
It seems like they have nothing. It's like
Yeah.
it's so weird. Like I literally got on Google Earth and like I started like so I looked at the neighborhood and then I'm like I'm like it's a college campus. I get that it's in Idaho, rural, but it's still a college campus. There was a dorm that was within a block. I'm like that dorm had to have cameras situated on it. They had to have some surveillance cameras. I go in, I'm like, like zooming in on Google Earth. I find this apartment because there's this whatever. I'm going to get in that rabbit hole, but that case is like, I don't, man. I mean, what are we going on 2 weeks?
Yeah.
It seems like they have nothing, like no lead. It's crazy to me. Like not even a witness who saw anything. And, you know, and having two other people in the apartment and a dog and no one insane. That's a crazy case. Like to me, that's the next Delphi, like that in the true crime community. I can just sense it. That case is going to be a thing, and I, like it's scaring me. It's going to go cold.
Another situation where people are getting murdered. There's other people in proximity. Nobody hears a thing.
It's great.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great example.
I mean, it was the middle of the night, you know, and it's a college campus and the kids were probably hammered. I know a majority of the, you know, the kids that had gone out and were partying, like I was in college, I got hammered. That was the thing that I did, you know, so it wasn't unusual when I'm, you know, staggering back to my dorm at, you know, 3 a.m, man, I'm face down in the bed, passed out, snoring, you know, so.
I can see that with Bob, can't you? Bob looks like a party animal, man.
Yeah. I used to be. I'm not so much. Now I'm old. So.
One of my viewers wants to know: is it going to be? Do we have to wait to the trial to see all the evidence, or does it come out at the trial and we just kind of watch the news reports to see what was released?
I think this bond hearing, that's probably going to turn out to be a bond hearing and a probable cause hearing. You're going to see a lot.
Yep.
You know, I think you may not see everything, and as Bob said, they're going to investigate this right up until the moment the jury delivers a verdict. But I think that's the next big event is that, because that's where a lot of cards are going to be laid on the table.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I agree.
You got any other?
My God,
we've kept these people for
dude.
That's.
Can we do it again sometime?
Yeah, we got guys. Yeah, I hope you had a good time. We'd love to have you on again at some point. Bob, Alice, Brett, thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming on. I've listened to the Prosecutors podcast before. Great podcast. Bob, I started listening to yours. Wonderful. You guys go to these. I'll put the links down below. Check these guys out, man. They got some very, very interesting cases that they're following and they're discussing. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, both of you, all 3 of you. Not you, Bob, but the other 2. But,
fair enough.
No, I'm joking. Thank all 3 of you for coming on tonight. Guys. We really do appreciate you taking your time this evening.
It's our pleasure.
And sharing that. So you guys have a wonderful night, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Good to see you guys too.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Oh,
that was awesome. God. That was awesome.
Wow. Yeah. I just learned so much.
Yeah. I've listened. I remember I was listening to the Prosecutors cast or their podcast when they've been around for a little bit. Very interesting stuff. And like, I didn't know about Bob's until you turned me on to it. And
he's so awesome.
Yeah. That Gacy stuff, man, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's tapes, there's things that, I watched a lot of stuff about John Wayne Gacy, and man, he has his dad's tapes, that stuff that's never been heard.
I think what I was telling you, like on that Defense Diaries, that first season with Gacy, is that, and everybody knows this, I work with kids. I'm literally around kids all the time. I couldn't listen to it. And I don't know if it's so much like around other people, because John Wayne Gacy was so just like open and on, and like, no, I wouldn't say honest, but just the way he talked about it was so like, it was insane. It's chilling. Absolutely chilling. What do you got over there? That thing was popping.
I gotta keep apologizing to you. With Pam not moderating anymore, I just, guys, I can't read the chat and do this at the same time. We're gonna have to figure out something, because it's not fair to you guys, and I do apologize, because I'm sure there was many questions there. But also I want to thank Susie and Mona, our mods. Thank you, man. Thank you so much. And Susie and Mona both they have a lot of knowledge on the case we discussed tonight, and hopefully they were able to answer some of your questions.
I bet they were, dude. They're
and
so awesome.
me and Garrett, we're trying to resolve that because I want to communicate with you guys. But, you know, unfortunately, like Garrett and I are doing the show, we're looking at notes, we're trying to do this and that, and we'll get it worked out somehow. I got to get somebody in here. I used to have Pam to hand me notes, which reminds me, guys, next week, we're going to have to take off again. Pam's and prayers for Pam. She's getting her heart checked out. We got she's doing some tests on her heart on Monday and then next Wednesday. So she's got 2 days of different tests they're doing on her heart. So we're hoping that all turns. I mean, I'm just hoping to God there's no blockages.
For sure.
But you know, but at least if there is, we find them and we take care of them.
Right.
And she's going to be okay. So prayers for her, guys.
Well, let's let this show simmer. Let's let people watch it, and we'll be back the week after.
Oh, and you know, yeah, we got to get back to something spooky though.
Yeah, we got it.
We haven't. I mean, unless there's something big, and that if something else happens again, guys, we'll come back and we'll talk about it.
Make sure you follow us on social media.
Yeah, follow.
Like, subscribe.
Please hit the like button. Please hit the share button. Subscribe if you're new to us. We thank you for showing up tonight. I thank everyone for showing up tonight.
Absolutely.
I think there's 172 of you guys in here tonight, which is awesome. And you, like I've always said, you guys could be doing something else, you know. And I appreciate that you spent your time watching our show. It does mean a lot to Garrett and I, and we don't take that lightly. And somehow, some way, I'm going to have to get a moderator in here or someone that's sitting next to me that can get questions to me, because Pam used to write it on a piece of paper, basically.
Throw it over.
Old school, hand it to me, and I'm reading it. I need to get it where the screen's set up for someone over there that they have control,
right,
where they can just pop it up on there. And I think we can eventually, hopefully, I can get someone else to come in and do that. But again, we love you guys. Thank you so much. Again, prayers for my wife. Hopefully everything will be okay. And we'll have a show for you in 2 weeks. And then Garrett, I think on the day after Christmas, Garrett's go ahead and tell him about this. Is pretty cool.
Going
man.
to Spain.
He's going to Spain.
I'll be in Barcelona for 5 days.
His soccer team won a championship. So they are now going to Spain to play in this championship, which my granddaughter, very proud of her.
Yep.
And
she's going to
and proud
great.
of you as well.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
Great soccer coach, obviously.
Yep. And then when we get back in the new year, it's just going to be an even better year of life after life.
Yeah.
Every year it gets
it's getting better.
And better.
Yeah, it's getting better. And I think we're getting better at the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I was so glad they got a joke. I was like, when I said, "Are you talking to us?" And like, And then when I looked at their faces, no one was laughing. They were like, "Is he serious?"
I think Bob caught on.
I was like, "Well, that was my feeble." I'm so bad about. I mean, I try to be funny, but that was kind of I tried, man. But Bob said, "Hey, it was hilarious." Right?
Yeah.
I got that. All right. So, guys, good night. Thank you again. We love you guys, all, man. And we will see you the next time we are on in 2 weeks. And you guys be safe out there, and we love you. So have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.